All right, so we'll say good morning. Let us begin. Today's daf is Mem Aleph 41. We are picking up Emirat Hashem on daf Mem Amud Beis 40b. So we'll say the Gemara says, let's begin by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev. To thank Josh and Becca Friedman for dedicating all the Shirman Drushos this month. Le'iloi Nishmas, Josh's father, Yisrael Yehuda ben Rav Chaim Rafael. To thank Sammy and Malka Esterson for dedicating and welcome back to Sammy Baruch Hashem from Eretz Yisrael, Baruch Haba. To thank the Estersons for dedicating the Shurim this month in memory of their parents, Yitzchak Leib ben Aaron HaKohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch Avram, Hinda Bas Henech Ephraim, and in the schus of the continued Gesund and Hatzlacha of Mr. Morton Esterson, Ad Mea Ve'esim Shanim Tovos. To thank the Pepper family for dedicating the Shurim, the commemoration of the yard site of Yosef Pepper, Yosef David Zichron Livracha ben Yaakov. To thank our week of learning sponsors, Ayala and Sarah Steinberg, in the schus of Rafur Shlema for Shulamis Bas Susha, and Hillary Jacobson Kent and Akiva Kent, in memory of Hillary's father, Tzvi Hirsch ben Chanoch. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors today, Shani Topper and family, in commemoration of the yard site of Shani's father, Josh Gutman, Yoshua ben Yitzchak, Zichron Livracha. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshamas will have an Aliyah and the families in Nechama. With that, let us begin. A lot to do today. Incredible Gemara. So we'll say, let's go. Today's Daf is Mem Aleph 41. We left off on the last few lines of Mem Amud Beis 40b. Says Gemara, Amar Rabbi Ami Amarav, Mai Dichsiv. What's the meaning of the pasuk? V'ata ben Adam, aselecha kli gola. So we'll say, remember again, the Gemara over here is quoting the pasuk from Yechezkel. So remember, the Navi Yechezkel is warning Klal Yisrael about the impending galus that will occur should Klal Yisrael choose not to right their ways. So one of the ways that Hakadosh Baruch Hu shows Yechezkel is, he tells Yechezkel, prepare for yourself the utensils for galus, right? The utensils you're going to need when you go into galus. So the hope was that Yechezkel would do this, the people would see what's happening, and what would occur, and ultimately they would do tshuva. So the Gemara says, so what are klei gola? Zu ner ukara. This refers to a candle and a plate. In other words, a lantern, like a lantern and a plate. That's what you need when you need to go into galus. Top of Mem Aleph. V'shatiach. What was shatiach? Rashi says over here, is or le'echal alav, is a leather mat to eat on. So a ner, a ka'ara, and the shatiach. Prepare those things, and those are the klei gola. So the Gemara says, b'choser kol. Now again, about the Gemara now quoting over here the pasuk from the Tochacha that talks about ultimately, again, if we don't go ahead and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu when we have plenty, then we will be forced to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu when we are lacking many things. What does it mean, b'choser kol, when you're lacking everything? What are we lacking? Or what will we be lacking in this moment of Tochacha? Amar Rabbi Ami Amarav, below ner u below shulchan. So it's referring to a time where we'll be afflicted so intensely that we won't even have a ner, light, and a shulchan. Now, both say, just understand, the ner, the Gemara B'Sachas Brachos brings down that a summa, a person who is blind, is never fully sated. Right? Why? Because part of the eating experience is seeing what it is that you're eating. So the idea of not having a ner represents the idea that I'll never fully be so satiated. Below shulchan, of course, if you don't have a shulchan, you can't eat like a mensch. So Rav Chisda Amar below isha. What does it mean b'choser kol? Without a wife. Without a wife. Rav Sheshes Amar below shamish. Rav Sheshes says without, but say shamish literally means someone like an attendant or a servant. It means ultimately, again, someone to help you with all of life's needs. Rav Nachman Amar below das. It means below das, without knowledge. Now, both say, so just understand, just to reframe the context here. In the Tochacha, remember again, there's two sides to the coin. The pasuk psukim talk about Hakadosh Baruch Hu bless us with many different things, and the idea over here is if we don't serve God in times of plenty, the Gemara says you're going to end up struggling to serve God in times of incredible difficulty and deficiency. So the pasuk uses the lotion of choser kol, when you're lacking everything. So the Gemara is trying to understand, what does everything refer to? What does everything refer to? So again, we have a number of different possibilities. One possibility is ner and shulchan. Other possibility is a spouse. Maybe you're lacking everything. Choser kol means living life without a spouse. Maybe at the end of the day, choser kol means without das. The problem, we'll say, is in times of difficulty, if you don't have your wits, if you don't have your das with you, then you don't have anything. So we'll come back to that in just a little bit. So Tana, below melach, below revav. Others say it means without salt and revav. So we'll say it's interesting. Rashi says revav means shuman, which means fat. The Ran says revav means shemen, which means oil. But the idea was is so fascinating. The idea over here is revav, melach is salt, revav is whether it's fat or oil. The idea is you're going to have food, but you're not going to have anything to flavor the food with. So I will say it's such an interesting idea that sometimes if you have food that doesn't have the right seasoning, so what happens? In other words, you could become full, you could have what you need, but the enjoyment of the eating experience is not there. So it's interesting that according to this approach, choser kol means you're not going to be able to enjoy the things that you have in life. Abaye. So Abaye says, Naktinon, we learned, Ein ani ela b'deya. I will say this is such a profound idea, that what is an ani? What is a truly, I will say, when we think about an ani, we think about a person who is financially impoverished. The Gemara says it's not true. The real ani is someone who is intellectually impoverished. And I will say, what does this mean? Someone who just doesn't have deya. Now, deya is one of those interesting words that's often difficult to translate, because you could translate deya as knowledge, but that's not really what it means. Deya, das, means a certain sense, a certain level of life common sense, right? That if you don't have common sense in life, you don't have deya, you don't understand how to navigate, you don't understand how to talk, you don't understand how to create relationships, you don't understand how to problem solve, right? You don't understand any of these things. Ultimately, again, you're impoverished. You're impoverished. So the Marava Amri in Eretz Yisrael, they said, this is such a great line. Didabe kulabe, delo dabe mabe. So I will say literally what it translated it means. Dida, if this thing is in you, you have everything. This thing being deya. If a person has deya, a person has common sense, a person has chachma. So didabe, if you have this, if this is in you, kulabe, you have everything. Delo dabe, if this is not in you, you don't have deya, mabe. Then what do you have? Dikani machaser. If you've acquired this, what are you lacking? Delokani makani. If you don't have it, then what do you have? We'll say, what a great line. Here the Gemara taught, and we'll say we know this, right? And the older we get from this, we know that ultimately, again, if you have deya, a person has what we'll just translate now as a common sense in life, an understanding, just about how to navigate, how to deal with people, and it's not just people, how to deal with circumstances. So if you have that, you have everything. If you don't have it, you could have all the other material trappings in the world, you have absolutely nothing. So the Gemara goes weiter. We'll say, so this is again, going back now to Bikur Cholim a little bit. The Gemara says a person is not healed from his illness until all of his sins are forgiven. Shene'emar hasolech lechol avonaychi harofe lechol tachluaychi. So I will say, now what does this mean? This goes back, we already referenced this in yesterday's daf a little bit. The idea, when a person is ill, illness represents that a person is standing in a matzav of din, right? In a matzav of divine judgment. And that's what illness is. In other words, I'm ill. Whenever a person is compromised, by definition, what that means is there's some element of judgment happening about them, or happening to them before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Gemara says something amazing. When a person is healed from an illness, what does that represent? The Gemara suggests it almost represents a complete absolution of their sins, which is incredible. In other words, I'm sick, so there's a time of judgment. I've been healed. That represents a certain level of absolution. I will say, I just want to point out, whenever you see Gemaras like this, Chazal never meant for us to go ahead and take these statements and plug it into every single life situation, right? Why? Because sometimes there are principles that are true, but the way the principle is applied in different ways may vary. Because, right, the paradigmatic example, I've mentioned this a number of times. The Gemara Bracha says, if you say Ashrei 3 times a day, you're going to Olam Haba. Going to Olam Haba. So I both say, is that it? If you say Ashrei 3 times a day, you're going to Olam Haba, is that it? right? Sounds fantastic, right? So I say Ashrei 6 times a day for that. No. So the Ritva says Ashrei 3 times a day in conjunction with many other good things in life, right, will lead you to Olam Haba. So there are certain statements of Chazal that are true, but are not meant, I shouldn't say that. All the statements of Chazal are true. There are certain statements that are standalone statements and certain statements that are to be understood in conjunction with other things. So I will say, there are some people who get sick and aren't healed and die from the illness. What does this mean? They weren't forgiven for their chataim? So that's what I'm saying. Theologically, you have to accept something as a truth. If Chazal say it, I accept it as a truth. How it actually plays out in life, I don't know, because Chakadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and there are many different things that come into play in any given life situation. But as a truth, the Gemara says, when a person is ill, there's standing judgments. When a person is healed, that means absolution from that judgment. How does absolution manifest itself? A total forgiveness of sin. Which I will say, by the way, so what does it mean? Anyone who's ever experienced illness and then been healed from illness also understands, how do you feel? New lease on life. Gratitude, absolutely, but it's like a new lease on life. It's like, okay, I've been given a second chance. This could have gone sideways. This could have gone sideways in so many different ways. I'm here. I didn't have to be here. So if I'm here, that means Chakadosh Baruch Hu is giving me a second chance. If I have a second chance, I better do so. That's the dynamic that Chazal are describing over here. You're ill, really ill. You're healed. It didn't have to go this way. Could have gone so many different directions. Now it's as if I've been absolved from all of my sins. Brand new beginning. Brand new beginning. I better maximize it. So the Gemara says, I will say sometimes, by the way, even after being healed from illness, a person regains former vitality, meaning literally it goes back to the days of your youth. Shena Amar, the pasuk says, "Rod fash besara minoar yashuv liimei alumav." I will say, so once again, does this literally mean that when a person is healed from illness, he regains all of his youthful vigor? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But once again, the metaphor that the Gemara is trying to paint, Hosea, is that when a person is healed from illness, they understand how fragile life is. They understand all could have been lost, and they understand now the gift of a second chance that they have been given from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you get a second chance from Hashem, I will say, you grab that with 2 hands and you make the most of it. You begin to live life with a new sense of urgency and with a new sense of energy, just like a young person. Incredible. Kol mishkava afachta b'chalyo. So I will say, what's the meaning of the pasuk? Until David HaMelech says literally again, my entire bed has been turned over with my illness. Rabbi say this is an incredible Gemara. Amr Rav Yosef, Lomar de Mishkach Limudo. Rabbi say sometimes illness could be so intense that a person could forget all of their learning. All of their learning. So Rabbi say, so again, that's the lashon of turning over your bed. Right? The bed right side up represents a certain order, a seder in life. The overturning of the bed represents a forgetfulness of one's learning. So I just want to point out over something very interesting, which is the Gemara, we're not talking over like an illness like dementia or Alzheimer's, where a person, the Gemara is talking about just physical suffering. Sometimes physical suffering could be so incredibly intense that it just saps a person of everything, even their learning. Person could forget everything. The Gemara tells a story about this. I will say the Gemara, it just tells you, by the way, also how like sometimes when a person is suffering physically, all of their energy and all of their reserves are simply channeled into survival. That a person often has no bandwidth for any level of spirituality. And we think when people become sick, they become more spiritual. Sometimes that happens, but more often than not, what happens is when a person is struggling physically, every little bit of energy I have has to just go to survival. There's nothing left. There's nothing left in the tank, for anything else. So sometimes it can be so intense you even forget all of your learning. The Gemara tells a story. So the Gemara says, Rav Yosef Chalash, Rav Yosef became ill. He forgot his learning. Rav Yosef forgot his learning. Ahadre Abaye Kame. Abaye, his student, retaught the Rebbe every single thing that the Rebbe had previously taught the student. So Gemara says, Rabbi say, that's why sometimes you'll see in the Gemara the following exchange. The Gemara will say something, Rav Yosef will say, wow, I never heard that before. And Amarle Abaye at Amrisa Nehilan, or Mahamas Nisa Amrisa Nehilan. And Abaye will say, Rebbe, no, you taught this to us, and it was in this context you taught us. So we'll say, absolutely incredible, right? The great Rabbi Yosef, Hilgah Rabbi Yosef, forgot his learning. His Talmud Abaye reteaches him everything that the Rebbe had formerly taught the student, right? Ultimately, again, and you see this exchange in the Gemara, so dramatic. Ki Avagamir Rebbe, Tzalas Asre Ape Hilchasa. So it was another incredible Gemara. Rebbe had learned, I will say, see, here's what's interesting. Rebbe had learned 13 orders of the Mishnah. Now I will say, we have 6 orders of the Mishnah, right? So this was before the Mishnah as we have it today was codified. So there were 13 different, we'll call it 13 different buckets of knowledge, right? 13 different orders, we'll call it. So Rebbe had learned all 13 orders. Agmare Rabbi Chia Shivan Minhon. Rebbe had taught his student Rabbi Chia 7 of them. Get ready for this. Lusof Chalash Rebbe. So I will say ultimately again, so Rebbe became ill and Rebbe forgot all of his learning. We'll say Rebbe Hudanasi became ill, forgot all of his learning, all 13 orders of the Mishnah. Right? So remember again, Rabbi Chia, the Talmud, retaught Rebbe, his Rebbe, the 7 orders, right? The seven orders that Rebbe had taught Rabbi Chia. We'll say, what was the problem? So the Gemara says, however, so Shisa Azdu. We'll say there were 6 orders of the Mishnah that were lost. Because remember again, Rebbe had learned 13, taught 7 of them to Rabbi Chia. The other 6 simply were lost. No one knew them. We'll say, listen to this. So Havahu Katzra, so we'll say there was a guy, Katzra we'll say is a launderer, not of money, of clothing. Right? In other words, we'll say, so this is just right. So this is the guy, the laundry guy. So I'll say, so get ready for this Gemara. Hava Shmiele Rebbe, first white line, Kida Hava Garis Lahu. I will say, get ready for this. Rebbe used to learn out loud. And Mepasha, you know how when you learn out loud, you often learn in a sing-song, right? So what would happen? This launderer, I guess he lived next door to Rebbe, or was next to Rebbe's base medrash. He was doing his work. Every day, he would just hear Rebbe learning out loud. So I will say, so what happened? So because of this, listen to this, because of this, the launderer had absorbed all of this knowledge. Now, the launderer had absolutely no idea what Rebbe was talking about. But I will say, it's no different. You hear someone saying something over and over and over, even if it's in a language you don't understand. So the launderer, I will say, listen to this, the launderer had remembered by heart all of the remaining 6 orders of the Mishnah. All the remaining 6 orders of the Mishnah. Shabbos says, listen to this. Azu Rabbi Chia v'gamar yasun kamei katzra. So Rabbi Chia went and learned the remaining 6 orders of the Mishnah from the launderer. Now again, the launderer had absolutely no idea what he was saying, but he heard it enough to be able to go ahead and convey it. Va'asa v'hader yason kamei Rebbe. And then Rabbi Chia went and retaught the remaining 6 orders to Rebbe. Kad havachazi le Rebbe lahu katzra. We'll say second wide line. Whenever Rebbe would run into this launderer, Amar le Rebbe. Right? So we'll say, listen to this. Rebbe would call the launderer Rebbe. Right? How beautiful. He would call the launderer my Rebbe. Ato asis osi ve'eschia. And he would say, the launderer, you made me, and you made Chia my student. Igedamir, alternate version of this. Hachi Kamar, this is what he said to him. Ata asi says Chia, the Chia asa osi. And the alternate version of this, I will say what happened. So ultimately, again, he would say to the launderer, you made Chia, and Chia made me. I will say, what an incredible story. But I will say, but it teaches us an incredibly important lesson. I will say, in your home, when you learn out loud. Learn out loud. Because I will say, the power of Torah is that Torah permeates everyone and everything around you. And I will say, if you go ahead and you learn out loud, right, your sing-song of Torah permeates your home. If you have young children, ultimately, again, they will pick it up. They'll pick up the terms. They'll pick up the words. They'll pick up the nigun. And that permeates, even though they have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. It doesn't make a difference. It becomes part and parcel of who they are. And even if you don't have young children at home, right? The person has a spouse at home, or a person has older children at home. When that sing-song of Torah becomes part of your home, it literally changes everyone around you. An awesome story. So the Gemara goes weiter. Gadol neish nasa lechole, Yosem min neish nasa lechananya Mishael va'Azariah. That was an incredible Gemara. Greater is the miracle that happens to a sick person who is healed, more than the miracle that happened to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And I remember Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are the contemporaries of Daniel. And remember, again, they were thrown into the fiery furnace by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel, and were miraculously saved. So also what the Gemara essentially says is, it's a greater miracle for someone who is ill to be healed than it was for Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah to be saved from the fiery furnace. What's the pshat? Shel Hananiah, Mishael, v'Azariah eish shel hedyot, v'akol yicholim lechvosa. So we'll say, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were thrown into an earthly fire. We'll say an earthly fire, anyone can put out. Anyone can put out. V'zu shel chola shel shamayim hi. And we'll say the fire of illness is a divine fire. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts that fire into man. Umi achol l'chvosa. The only thing that could extinguish the fire of illness is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Isn't that incredible? Therefore, I will say, it's just such an interesting idea because, we'll say all of us get sick, right? I'm saying sometimes seriously, sometimes, but the process of refuah, the idea that I was ill and now I'm healed, that is direct divine intervention. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu could go ahead and heal the fire or extinguish the fire of illness. It's true, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a doctor, gives modern medicine, science, the knowledge to help be the shaliach. But the shaliach is only as powerful as the mishaleach, as the principle. So the fire of illness is never extinguished without divine intervention. Incredible. Crazy Gemara. Listen to this. Now, I will say, this is an interesting phrase. If you take a look, well, let's just say this outside. Actually, take a, fine, it's supposed to listen to this. Once a person's time, literally translated, once a person's time comes. In other words, once it's time for me to leave this world, everything has control over me. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, it's about 8 lines up from the bottom. Hakol Moshlin Bo. Rashi says, La miso afilu zvuv afilu yitush. So what the Gemara is saying is like this. When I'm alive, there's a certain power I have over creation. And this goes back to Adam Arishon, right? Ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put Adam in charge of the world. So therefore, by definition, there's like a natural fear that animals have of man. When it's time for a person to leave this world, right, everything has control over him. Right? The Gemara says, even a fly, even a gnat has the ability to bring about the death of a person, because since it's time for me to leave this world, by definition, I no longer have any shlita. I no longer have control over the world. The Gemara tells a story. So the Gemara says, where do we know this from? Shneimar v'hayok kol motzi yahargeni. This is by Cain. Cain says, anyone who finds me will kill me. The idea is over here that after HaKadosh Baruch Hu condemned Cain, Cain essentially said everything is going to happen. We'll say it's such a musar. When we're alive, there is a certain control we have over the earth. When it's no longer my time to live in this world, everything has control over me to bring about my end. Rav said from the following pasuk, L'mishpatecha amdu hayom ki hakol avadecha. We'll say the way the Gemara translates this pasuk is like this: L'mishpatecha amdu hayom, when the day of my judgment comes, i.e., it's time for me to leave this world. Hakol avadecha, everything in this world is the servant of Hashem to bring about my end. The Gemara tells a story. Shmuel Chazilahu. No, I skipped. Rabbi Bar Shila Amrulei. So let's listen to this. Rabbi Bar Shila, they told him the following story. Shchiv Gavra Gavoa. There was a very tall guy, listen to this, who was riding, Havarochiv Girduna Zutra, who was riding on a very small donkey. Then I will say, now what's the pshat if you're very tall riding on a small donkey? What's the good news? Your feet always touch the ground. Okay, fine. Mata titura istuyot shadje v'kashachiv. So we'll say what happens? They were on a bridge, the donkey suddenly jerked and threw the guy over the bridge and he died. So I'll say, what's the pshat in the story? Hey, the pshat in the story is, well, so you say to yourself, is there any way that a short donkey could kill a tall guy? And the answer is no. Because the tall guy could always, watch Rabbi say, put his feet down. But the idea over here is that a story happened, the donkey jerked in such a way, tall guy wasn't prepared, threw him over the bridge. So I'll say, what do you see from here? Kari al nafshe lemishpatecha amdu hayom. So he said this story to Rabbi Shila. Rabbi Shila said, of course, first he said, ay nebach, but then after that, he said, wow, it's incredible. When it's time for a person to go, I will say, when your time is up in this world, the truth is, everything has control over you, or better stated, you no longer have control over anything. And because of that, again, even the control you think you normally have during the course of life, you no longer have once your time in this world is up. Such a profound Gemara. Amar Shmuel, one more story. Shmuel, Chazi alhu dakbara yasiva al akrukasa va'avra nara tarka gavru maya. So this is incredible. Shmuel once saw a scorpion catch a ride on the back of a frog against a body of water. When the scorpion got to the other side, it bit someone and it killed him. So I will say, what did Shmuel say? So Kari alei lemishpatecha amdu hayom. But by the way, obviously it's not a case where Shmuel saw this happening and just like sat there and watched the guy get stung by the scorpion. The idea, Shmuel didn't know what was unfolding, but he saw this unfold right in front of him. I will say, so what did he see? I don't know. According to the Ran, scorpions and frogs are not natural allies, right? But the idea over here is that when it's time for a person to leave this world, everything has control over him. Incredible. I will say, but that's the most humbling thing. We live life with an illusion of control, thinking that we control circumstances. And the truth is, because Baruch Hu allows us to live with that illusion for a little while, but once my time here is over, there is no control over anything, which is why the demise of man could be brought about even from the most unlikely of realities, because I control nothing when my time here in this world is finished. Amr Shmuel, but say back to Bikur Cholim. You will say you're only allowed to visit the sick for someone who has a fever. Now I will say, now what does that mean? What the Gemara understands, we're doing over here is we're trying to say there are certain people you should not visit. Certain people you should not visit. Lafuke mai, lafuke had the sign Rabbi Yossi ben Parta, Amr Shmuel Rabbi Eliezer, ein mevakrin lo cholemi ayin, v'lo cholia ayin, v'lo mechushe harosh. Rabbi Eliezer says you shouldn't go ahead and visit someone who's suffering from stomach issues, right? Stomach issues, or from eye issues, or from intense headaches. So my timer. So what's the reason for this? So I'm sorry. So we'll say I understand why I shouldn't visit someone with stomach issues. Why not? I will say that's an embarrassment issue, right? A person who has stomach issues may have to constantly run to the bathroom or take care of other bodily needs, so they don't want visitors. It's not an appropriate time. It's not appropriate to visit them because it'll just make them feel worse. As I say that, I understand. But what's wrong with visiting someone who's having eye issues or headache issues? This is incredible. My time, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, Dibura Kasha Le'ina, Umali La Shisa. So let's listen to this, because sometimes a person who's suffering from headaches or from eye pain, so conversation is difficult. And if you come to visit that person, they may feel what? Compelled to strike up conversation. Meanwhile, conversation exacerbates their issue. And therefore, again, it's interesting. So the Gemara says, so conversation is difficult for eye issues and, of course, for headache issues, but actually conversation is good to take down fever. Interesting. So we'll say, so again, this all is is the general construct that we've seen by Bikur Cholim. We've seen already, Bikur Cholim serves so many different needs. Number one, right, when you go and visit, you take away some level of the pain, right? Number two, you provide a sense of companionship. Number three, you have the ability to go ahead and see what can be done for the person, to literally help out. But the idea about saying Bikur Cholim is a person has to be sensitive. Is my visit helping? Or is my visit harming? And I will say sometimes, again, it's so interesting that we don't, in other words, often, I will say we become focused on the mitzvah and we forget about the person, right? So we think, okay, I have to do Bikur Cholim. Yeah, you have to do Bikur Cholim. But it's only a mitzvah if it actually helps the person, right? Again, if it's actually detrimental, not only is it not a mitzvah, but chas v'shalom, you're making a person actually feel worse. The Gemara goes right, Amar Rava, Hayashisa, listen to this, fever, Ilav De parvanka de malacha de mosa. I will say, listen to this. Fever is pretty intense. If fever wasn't the agent of the malach hamaves, ma'ali, fever would actually be good. How? Amud beis kechizra ledikli chad litlas in yomin. Suppose, listen to this. So a palm tree has some prickly thorns around the tree. What's the point of the prickly thorns? They protect the dates. So just like a palm tree, just like the prickly thorns, right? They're the prickly protrusions, ultimately are beneficial. Rashi says over kimo ha'atad shemakif hadekel umagin leperos. Right? Just like again, the thorns are good on the thorn tree, on the palm tree, are good to protect the thorns. So fever once every 30 days is helpful as well, because I guess fever helps purge the body of different things. The problem is, fever often is the precursor for the malach hamaves, so that way fever is not good. But again, the Gemara just points out, were it not the fact that fever is often the messenger of the malach hamaves, the angel of death, fever could actually have a certain level of benefit for the individual as well. V'chi tairiki legufa. It's like literally a medicine for the body. Medicine for the body. It helps to purge certain detrimental things from the body. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar lohi v'lo tairike. Rav Nachman says it's okay. I'm happy to do without the fever, without its medicinal benefits. Better not to have any of it. Amar Rabbi bar Yonason, Amar Rav Yechiel. Our son yafeh lechol l'refuaso. Suppose now the Gemara mentioned that fever could be beneficial ultimately again for a person, right? For a person, we're going to talk about other things that could be beneficial ultimately for a person who is ill. Our son is very healthy, so the Gemara says, our son." In other words, our son is healthy for a person who is ill. Our son. What's our son? Say Mem Aleph Amud Beis, 5 lines down. What's our son? Rabbi Yona's son. Chushla desari atikta dereish nafa. So we'll say, take a quick look at Rashi. The Ran translates this a little bit differently, but let's say we'll go with Rashi. Chushla desari, Rashi says, So'orim yishenin kalufim. This means aged barley that's peeled. Peeled aged barley, the Reish Nafa, Rashi says, that's been ground up, put into the sifter, and is still sticking to the sifter. So peeled aged barley that still sticks to the sifter. It's very healthy. It's very good if you're ill. Okay, so the Gemara says, it's good, it's healthy as long as what? You cook it very thoroughly as ox meat. Ox meat is very tough, and if you want to make it soft, you have to cook it for a long time. Rav Yosef Amar, smidi disari atikta dreish nafya. Rav Yosef says, no, you know what's healthy? Fine flour that's made from aged barley that gets stuck in a sifter. That's very healthy if you are ill. Abaye says again, payon bishulan kebisra detura. Just make sure you cook it very well, like meat, like ox meat. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan, burdam ein mevakrin. I will say if a person is suffering from burdam, you do not go ahead and visit such a person. Not only that, ve'in maskirin shmo. You don't even say the name of the diseased. Now what's the pshat? So Amar Belazar, what is this? Mibneshu kumayo novea. Ultimately, again, a person like this is like a flowing spring. Now say, if you look at Rashi says over here, burdam, it's the last wide line on the top. Rashi says, burdam, besamach shulshul gadol shiyotze kol shah, kamayin hanovea, she'im lo shulayim v'yotzmen kalamayim. So we'll say, this is like a bloody diarrhea. So, right? So therefore the Gemara says, don't visit that person. Right? I would say, so again, once again, I will say, again, so you'll say to yourself, no problem, not going there anyway, right? So I'll say, so just want to point out, again, I will say, it's such an incredible idea, because sometimes we lose the trees from the forest, again, in the performance of mitzvos. And often, especially in Adam L'Chavero, sometimes again, we forget the Chavero part in the mitzvah, recognizing that it's true, there's a mitzvah b'ikar cholim. But as we've seen, now we've gone through the sugya, the mitzvah b'ikar cholim is to benefit the person who is ill. And if your visit is going to be detrimental, don't go. Don't go. You could call, you could definitely call, you can send an email, you can send a text, but don't go. I will say so many, and this is true in so many different ways. Sometimes we try to do something good, we try to help, but we don't necessarily try to help with the right kind of sensitivities, and sometimes the help becomes, just makes things 10 times worse. So the Gemara says, don't visit the guy with burdam, and we don't even mention it. Now, both say, if you look at Tosis is in the right hand bottom margin. Tosis says, ve'in maskir shmo, why not? Lefishem is bayish acholik maskir. That is actually very interesting. The Gemara says, sometimes you even have to be careful about mentioning certain types of illness, that people are sick with a certain type of illness. Why? Because even just a mention of the illness could be embarrassing for the individual. So if you say, Shimon's got boredom, people are like, oh, right, and like it doesn't, like, and I'll say, and again, the problem is it's embarrassing for Shimon. It's embarrassing for Shimon. So I'll say, so it's also, I'll say, by the way, you know what this is like? Do you remember in the beginning of the pandemic, like if someone got COVID, you're like, oh, what a mamzer, right? Right? You weren't careful, you were this, how dare you, right? It was like the highest level of indictment, right? You shirked every level of social responsibility, right? If you guys, it was not like embarrassing, no, it's not COVID, it's the flu, right? It's not, right? And again, like people literally wouldn't talk, it's just such an, so the idea that Gemara says, there are certain illnesses that by definition are embarrassing for the individual. So the Gemara says, don't even say, so don't visit such a person, and don't even talk about the fact, you can say that they're sick, but don't even talk about the nature of the sickness. So the Gemara says, back to the Gemara, Lama Nikra Shmo Burdam, why is it called Burdam? So we'll say it's actually a contraction, Shu Kimayon Hanoveya, he's like a flowing spring. And we'll say it's actually Bur, which means like a cistern, dam, of blood. See, he's like a flowing cistern of this bloody shulshul. So the Gemara says that's called bordam. Good, fine. So we'll say the Gemara goes weiter. Back to Nedarim for a little bit. It's quite a transition from bordam back to Nedarim. Right? Good. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, Umarapeyu refuas hanefesh avalu refuas haguf. So we'll say, remember again, going back to our same case. Ruvain made a neder that he cannot confer any benefit upon Shimon, or Shimon can't derive any benefit from it. It doesn't matter, it's the same case. So I say, so now what happens? Shimon becomes ill. So now the Mishnah said that Ruvain could go ahead and heal Shimon, refuas hanefesh, but not refuas haguf. So what does that mean? Right? Literally again, spiritual healing, but not physical healing. What does that mean? So the Gemara says, Haich echi katani. What's the case? Maybe refuas nefesh means for free. That Ruvain could heal Shimon for free because he's not providing him ma'ano. But ultimately, again, he cannot provide him refuas and mammon, which means for pay. In other words, that if Ruvain normally does this for free, he could do it. But if he does it for pay, he can't do it because then he's giving Shimon a monetary benefit. Then if that's the case, less nihachi mirapeu b'chinav alo b'schar. Then literally let the Mishnah write. He could heal him for free, but not provide a service for which he would normally charge. Ella, listen to this, refuas nefesh gufo, refuas mamon behemto. Rather, what it means is like this. It means that Ruvain is allowed to heal Shimon, right? Because remember again, Ruvain has a mitzvah to go ahead and help a fellow Jew. So that's not covered under the neder, or like we saw before Abba said, that even when Ruvain made the neder, or Shimon made the neder, he didn't mean to limit things that would directly benefit him. What can't Ruvain do for Shimon? Ruvain can't heal Shimon's behema, his animal, because that's conferring a service. Amar Zutra Bartovia, Amarav, Aval Omer Lo, Samploni Yafala, Samploni Rala. Even though Ruvain can't heal Shimon's behema, what can he do? He could give him medical advice. Or veterinary advice, right? You could use this medicine, and that's not called conference of Hana. Beautiful. Now let's say Mishnah. Here we go. Interesting Mishnah. So it's very interesting. So same case. Let's say Ruvain made a neder that Shimon cannot get any benefit from me. So imagine the following situation. Shimon is going ahead and bathing in a large pool, right? In a large pool. Ruvain could get in there as well. Avalo b'ketana. But Ruvain can't get into the same pool if it's a small pool. I will say that. What's the pshat? This is actually incredible. So the Ran points out there, is what happens when you have one person in a pool, right? A pool like a bathtub, if you can imagine, like a large tub. So what happens? The water level is a certain level. When a second person gets in, what happens? The water level rises. Now the water level rising is a benefit. Why is it a benefit? Because now again there's more hana for me, because now I'm a bit more submerged in the water. So if Reuven made a neder, that Shimon can't benefit from him. So if Shimon's bathing in a large pool, Reuven could get in also. If it's a small pool, Reuven can't get in. Why? Because his act of entry into the pool causes the water level to rise, which is what? A hana for Shimon. We'll say furthermore, the yashin ibo b'mita. And we'll say if Shimon is sleeping in a bed, right? Reuven could sleep in the same bed along with Shimon. Rabbi Huda Omer, 1 second. Bimos achama. That's true during the summertime. Avalo bimos but not during the rainy season. Mipnei shehu mehaneu. Because I will say if Shimon is sleeping in the bed and now Reuven comes to sleep in the same bed, the body heat ultimately benefits Shimon during the winter months. See, during the summer, it doesn't matter. During the summer, we don't want body heat, right? But ultimately, again, if Reuven's sleeping in the bed and Shimon comes to sleep in the same bed, Shimon's sleeping in the bed, Reuven comes to sleep in the same bed, the body heat ultimately benefits Shimon. Umeisiv imo alamita, but again, if Shimon is sitting on the bed, Reuven could sit on the same bed with him. Va'ochel imo ala shulchan, so Reuven could eat at the same table that Shimon is eating at as well. Avalo min tamchui. I will say, what can't they eat from? Is very interesting. I will say, tamchui is like a platter. So I will say, often tamchui is actually used in a couple of different ways. But I will say, if you can imagine for just a moment, the Ran says over here, right about 6 times up before it gets wide, avalo min tamchui, the Ran says, im nosen l'shneim ka'ara biyachad. So I will say, if you can imagine, let's say they put a big platter in the middle, and everyone's eating from the same platter. So I will say, if Reuven made a neder that Shimon cannot get benefit from him, Reuven and Shimon can't eat from the same platter. Why? Because I will say, listen to this. If Reuven eats less, then what? Shimon gets more. So it turns out that Reuven is providing hana ultimately again for Shimon. However, aval ochel hu min tamchei achozer. So I will say, this is very interesting. But what can they share? They could share, I will say, a platter that goes back to the balabas. Now, I will say, listen to this. There were different types of platters. Sometimes you put out the platter and there was enough for the guests. Sometimes what ended up happening is it was customary that after the meal, the platter, the remnants of the platter would be given back to the balabais, to the balabas. And I will say, in that kind of case where the platter goes back to the balabas, you made sure there was always more than enough food for both parties. When there's more than enough food for both parties, then whether Reuven eats a lot or eats a little, he's not benefiting Shimon because there's more than enough food for both of them anyway. That's called a tamchui hachozer. So if it's a tamchui that doesn't go back to the balabas at the end of the meal, Reuven and Shimon can't share because there's a concern that Reuven may end up benefiting Shimon. If it's a tamchui, a platter that goes back to the balabas, ultimately they can share because that means there's more than enough for both of them. Therefore, whether Reuven eats a lot, eats a little, doesn't impact Shimon. We'll stop over here for today. We'll continue with the Gemara tomorrow. Shkoyach.